Hello, dear chess friends. This is Paul, National Master Paul Agron, and today I'm going to show you a game of mine that I played a few years back against an expert-rated player. The game is very interesting because it demonstrates a number of positional concepts, including play on a certain square complex and an imbalance in minor pieces. So let's start. So my opponent starts with d4, a very reasonable way to start. I start with this offbeat way of d6, which could lead to a number of positions, including an old Indian defense, Roberts defense, or modern defense, and a King's Indian defense, and a few other defenses which are kind of very offbeat. So my opponent takes the center, very reasonable move. I play g6 with the idea of fianchettoing the bishop, and we're entering Roberts or modern defense territory. My opponent takes out the other knight, which is also very reasonable. He's controlling the center very nicely. And I play this c6 move to also control the center. And my opponent takes out the bishop. And here I play a very interesting move, which is very consistent with my strategy to be seen, of exchanging bishop for the knight. Now, why would I exchange a bishop for the knight so early in the game? One of the reasons was that I was playing a lower rated opponent. Now, this is not an unsound strategy. However, one needs to be very carefully when giving a bishop this early in the game, when giving the bishop for the knight this early in the game, because the opponent might have later on a number of opportunities to open up the center. So my opponent attacks the bishop and I take the knight. And so we have an imbalance in material. I bring the knight into d7. My opponent develops the bishop. And I basically, by the way, the previous move was just a plain checkmating threat, so I need to defend from it. My opponent castles and I bring in the remaining knight. And after the queen moves, attacking the d6 pawn, I attack the bishop. Notice that all of my pawns, virtually all of them, except for one, are on light squares. And I'm basically shutting down this light squared bishop. Now, the question is where to place the bishop. My opponent places the bishop on b3. And it turns out that this is not a really good square for the bishop, because the bishop keeps throughout the game on hitting this wall of light pawns, which are kind of limiting the bishop. Also, after a couple of moves, my opponent pushes the e-pawn and shuts down the center. Now, remember, we have a knights versus bishops imbalance. And in such situations, so first of all, the position is locked. And that favors the knights. Locked positions favor knights. Moreover, there are 8 pawns on the board still. And that also favors knights, because pawns are essentially obstructive units which limit, typically, mobility of bishops. So my knights can hope to be better, although the position is still very much in the equal territory. So my knight comes out, forking the queen and the bishop. And the queen goes here. Now, I could have gained a tremendous advantage here. Well, I mean, the queen went to f3. It could have gone, for example, to g4. Very similar idea. And here, I could have just obtained a winning position after c5. The rook could have, come into the center. I could have taken, bishop takes, and here. And the e-pawn is indefensible at the moment. Because, remember, had my opponent moved the f-pawn forward to defend the e-pawn, he's disconnecting the queen from the bishop and he loses the bishop. And so the best way to play would have been to just defend the bishop. I take, and I just win a clean pawn. And notice the light bishop of white is still shut down by my central pawns. So this is an absolutely winning position for black. Unfortunately, I did not play that way. I thought I had this move anyway, a move later, right? But it turns out that after just lifting the queen and connecting the rooks, preparing the c5 push, my opponent plays this very smart move, And now c5 is not really great. It's okay, it can be played, but it's not a great move because it could be met by c3, just holding the center. So I played another move. So if you can't attack the pawn chain from behind, attack it from the front, so to speak. So I played this f6 move, attacking the pawn chain from the front, forcing my opponent to take. Now after I take with the bishop, my opponent defends the center and I bring the bishop back. Notice the queen is on the same line with the rook, and there are various discovery tactics which start being possible. And so the queen moves out of the way. And here the best move would have been to just push the e-pawn and to give my dark squared bishop some work, essentially. But I didn't play that. I played a reasonable move, which is to attack the queen again. But my opponent finds a very nice move to just pin the knight. And after I move the queen out of the way, he takes the knight. I take the knight. So one of the things we can notice is that all of black pieces are sort of moving to the queen side. Sorry, to the king side. All of black pieces are moving to the king side. And even though we have a backwards pawn on an open file, so this e6 pawn is a backwards pawn on open file. And Aaron Nimzovich talks about that quite a bit in a book. He wrote a very popular chess book called My System many, many years ago. It's a classic chess book. So he basically highlights this backward pawn on open file as a weakness, which it is, had it not been for other factors, such as dynamic factors. And dynamically speaking, I stand very well. Black stands very well, right? He's ready to bring this a rook to a semi-open f file, right? So the f rook is getting ready to come over and help out. And all of the pieces are super active. And notice this light bishop is still not in the game, still hitting the granite wall of light pawns. So my opponent starts remaneuvering according to the classic principles. He wants to remaneuver the knight to the e5 square. And I bring the rook, and he follows up. And I just activate the bishop, because bishop was not really active on that diagonal. So we need to give it a new diagonal to be active. And here my opponent had the opportunity to, well, for example, bring the queen back and basically hold equality. The position is pretty reasonable for white. Okay, although I would say the position is also very reasonable for black at this point. But my opponent, without a second thought, brings the knight into this beautiful e5 square, and he runs into a nice tactic. I'm going to give you a few moments to find the tactic. Okay, for those who found the tactic, congratulations. So the tactic is here. Knight jumps into e3, which is basically forking the queen and the rook. And after the pawn gets taken, I take with check, disconnecting the king from the rook. So now the king steps out of the way, and now we have a winning position. However, in a winning position, it is very important to still keep on playing good moves, and ideally best moves. And to basically calculate things out and to not fall into a situation where you end up essentially with, you end up giving away an advantage. So you really need to keep, nurture, and maintain your advantage. And here I give a check, and the king really shouldn't go back to h1 because there are all kinds of discovery tactics on the king. And so the king comes out forward, and I protect my rook, which is otherwise attacked. So now my opponent plays with what would have been a double attack. What do I mean by a double attack? Well, he disconnects my queen from the rook, and he's attacking my e6 pawn. So here I had to actually calculate, I had to foresee this position from a few moves back, and to realize that this double attack is possible. And I had to calculate it all the way to this move. Now, had the white king gone to h2, there's a very nice line which leads to a checkmate in 2. Okay, so he can't really go back. So, and really no other move really works out for my opponent, because if the king goes forward anywhere, he gets checkmated pretty much. And it's very easy to see that, you know, for example, a move like this runs into a checkmate. All right. So my opponent basically decided to give the queen for 2 pieces. And after this move, I'm penetrating into white's camp, and he's losing all of his pawns. So here the game pretty much ended. So let's recap what we've learned. What have we learned? We have learned the concept of playing on a certain square complex. We have learned how to essentially limit the opponent's bishop, how to create material imbalances. So in this game, we've created a knight versus bishop imbalance. And we've learned that even in the situations when we are better, when we win some material, we need to be vigilant, and we need to calculate our variations to the end and to see our positions to tactical and strategic fruitions. Thank you. Till next time.